Babysitters, what's the darkest family secret you know? Viewer edition. Hey folks, quick content warning for this video. Sadly, there is going to be some mention of child abuse of varying degrees, and so if you are sensitive to that subject matter, you might want to brace yourself, or you may even want to skip this video. Story 1. I had one client starting when I was 13. She had been a very young first-time mother and had 6 children by the time I began working for her. I loved that she had so many books to read, that her kids were nice, her house was cozy, she was very nice, and the children she babysat during the day were sweet too. Yes, I used to babysit for as many as 12 to 15 children at a time, sometimes for very long hours on the weekends. It was great. I made a lot of money, and even her enormous dogs were nice. Sadly, her husband was away on an extended military assignment, but she had a lot of friends in similar situations, so she had fun. And I didn't even mind spending the whole weekend there occasionally, as then I really made money. She also recommended me to some of her friends. Did I mention she was a great cook and would leave delicious food for the children and I? I was very young and very naive, so when a man brought her home one night, I woke up 2 a.m. or so, me snoozing on the comfy couch with nice bedding she made up for me. I greeted him by what she had told me was her husband's name, figuring that she had probably picked him up from work so they could go out. Oops! She introduced me to him, and it was not her husband. It was just a friend. She wrote me a really generous check and then told her friend to pay me, and he gave me a wad of money. Woohoo! And I got driven home. I think that was the best babysitting gig ever. Thank you, Mrs. F. Okay, I think most of us watching this might have some idea as to who this friend was, and not for us to judge. We don't know the situation, what everyone's going through, anything like that. You made your money, a nice little bonus in there, and you kept your nose out of other people's business, however sordid it may be. Story 2. Not a babysitting story, but this girl I was friends with had a single mom that bought alcohol for us and partied with us all the time. We were 15 to 17. As a kid, I thought this was cool. My husband and I grew up together, so he was often there as well. He randomly started calling her mom a pedo, not behind her back, but to her face. I thought he was joking with her or something until he told me that she had offered him a ride home one night, and instead of taking him home, she pulled into an empty church parking lot in the middle of nowhere. He was 16, she was like 46. She leaned over and put her hand on his D and shoved her tongue down his throat. Him and I were together at this time as well. He pushed her away and said he wasn't interested, and it was weird. She told him she was disappointed, and if he ever changed his mind, he knew where to find her. She then took him home. He was so embarrassed he didn't tell anyone for months until he told me, and he tried to act normal going over there so no one would get suspicious. He ended up telling me because she had started randomly touching him and he wasn't comfortable hanging out there anymore. He asked me not to tell anyone. I never did, and obviously understood why he was uncomfortable. When we stopped going over there, her mom told her that it was probably because Alicia found out he cheated with me. I crap you not. She told her daughter they kissed when she said something to me about it. I asked him if I could tell her the truth due to the situation, and he reluctantly said yes. I told her. She was disgusted at first and said she totally understood why we weren't hanging out at her house anymore. A little while later, the whole vibe between us changed and we slowly stopped being friends. Hey folks, if this happens to you, be you a guy, girl, non-binary, whatever, even if this is a woman doing this, because there's still some people with this mindset, so let me just tell you now, that is still assault. That is not okay in the least. And you are perfectly, A, it says nothing bad about you, and B, you should tell someone that you trust, because that just should not be allowed to happen. And you should not have to hang on to that like some secret. It's nothing to be embarrassed about. Screw people who do that kind of stuff and tell someone you trust. It is okay. Story 3. It's so petty stuff that babysitters see. A thing all girls said in high school was they wouldn't pay you until next time because they wanted to make sure you came back next week. What they did was get drunk every weekend. They would come back wasted and just say you could go, they pay you later. The truth was they drank himself broke. They didn't have the money until next week. One of my friends said she babysat for the neighbors and they stayed in bed until 3 in the afternoon. The kids were on their own. When they wanted her to babysit the next week, they said they would pay Saturday. They went out Saturday and Friday and they owed her last week. She said no. So they paid her for last week and Friday. They came back at 2 in the morning and said they would find another babysitter. That Saturday, they were begging her to watch their kids. They ran out of the house before they paid her and refused to pay her for that night. Often there was no food in the house, so she used her money to buy food for the kids. They were late on paying her and just left the kids alone. They came over, begged her to watch them. You're saying call social services? Yeah, right. As bad as that is, getting the system involved is worse. All the girls I knew said more or less the same thing. Parents went out drinking and came home drunk. They all hated paying the babysitter, and there was hardly food in the house. The kids were needy and unhappy. Not a single parent was poor or low-lifers. Going out to drink shouldn't be seen as normal. Story 4. When I was in kindergarten, I was not yet diagnosed with autism yet and was a standout to my fellow classmates. My teacher, let's call her Ms. Poor, would mark me down on a behavior chart, the ones where if you were good and got marked up, vice versa if you were bad, and would do this every day until I transitioned to first grade. She would also pinch me for every infraction that was in her mind not good. This ranged from laughing at all, getting marked down, accidentally messing up drawings, reading anything on the Titanic, was a huge enthusiast, or disrespecting her. Because she marked me down so much, she got the full permission from admin to keep me inside during recess and make me walk laps around a massive field. I was yelled at by her in front of the class, and she would berate me every time I was forced to stay in during recess. One time I shook my head while she berated me, and she grabbed me, and in front of my face, she started yelling so much I think the kids outside could hear her. Even my friends weren't safe, as she would do everything in her power to keep them down, as well as myself. That was back in 2014, and I will never forgive her. Story 5. So, this is a story about my friend. She lives in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, so her father is a landlord as well. One of the people renting an apartment from her father asked for a last-minute babysitter, so he volunteered his daughter, my friend, to babysit her son, who was 7 years old at the time. So it gets interesting. The mom and dad told my friend they would be home around maybe 10 p.m. or later than that, so, her and the kid were hanging out. The next thing she knows, the kid just says they're not going to be home until later than that. My friend literally says, "How do you know this?" Then the kid says, "My parents usually do this type of thing often." And damn, the kid was right. His parents came back home around maybe 3 in the morning. My friend was sleeping in the living room when they came in drunk as bloody skunks and just say they tipped my friend pretty well that night, enough that will cover her con badge and some stuff at the con that summer. Found out later at that convention from my friend that the parents were at a college house party with a friend who was an alumni of one of the students. Long story short, it was a wild party. The things I hear from my friends whose parents are landlords, I swear. And as for that kid, I hope he's doing well. I mean, I'm not a parent, but I can see why they might end up staying out a little bit too late. You're stuck home with a kid, especially at 7. It's kind of at the age where you've just really, truly began to start going out and staying out and having fun. You've had years of dedicating your every bit of free time to a child. And so you might party a little bit too hard, and I get that, but be upfront with your babysitters and stuff. Parents, don't tell them like, "Oh yeah, we'll be home by like 11 or 12, and then stumble in at 3. Just be completely upfront. Let them know, hey, however long you're here, we're going to pay you, stuff like that. Is that okay? Don't lie to people just so you can go out and have fun. Be on the same page. Story 6. I had my teacher call CPS on my family once when I was in 3rd grade. I have a fairly large birthmark on my stomach that I'm very self-conscious about. One day I was stretching or something and another kid saw it and asked what it was. Being self-conscious about my body in general, I didn't want the kids to have something else to make fun of me for, so I made up something that would sound cool. Having played a lot of video games, specifically Doom and other shooters, my stupid 3rd grade brain decided the best course of action was to say, "I was shot," and leave it at that. It worked. They didn't make fun of me. The next day, I'm pulled into the counselor's office with 3 teachers and somebody in a suit I had never seen before. Retrospectively, this was probably a CPS agent. They asked me about it, and because I wasn't trying to impress the teachers or stop them from bullying me like I was my classmates, I told them the truth and showed them the birthmark. Never heard about it again, and I don't think they ever spoke to my mother. Story 7. This goes to show that the people that we think are perfect aren't, and that things are not what they seem. Nobody is perfect. There are skeletons in everyone's closet. That person who you think had such a great life might be dealing with hidden struggles that you know nothing of. Ask before you go assuming stuff about anything. That's why we should not compare ourselves to other people in a negative way. Everyone's life is different, and everyone has different things that they are able and aren't able to do. And I'm all for a good competition, but if you feel bad about yourself because you're not as perfect as the image that people on social media put out, you're going to constantly feel unfulfilled and bad about yourself because there will always be someone better than you, so work on beating your records and not other people's records, because other people's records might not be possible for you. Story 8. Yeah, adoption has very little to do with the ability or desire to love another woman's child. It takes money, lots and lots of money. 20 plus years ago, the average adoption cost was upwards of $30,000. Never mind the tedious and lengthy process. Most people who adopt are extremely wealthy or spend 10 plus years fundraising. Unless you know someone personally who's willing to let you adopt their baby, which can be a whole heap of drama in itself, adoption is not the rainbow and butterflies many think it is. Yeah, I think in the previous video, I was talking a big thing about how great adoption is and people should pursue that more, but this person is right. Unfortunately, adoption can be kind of prohibitively expensive or take a really long time, and, I still think it's a good option that a lot of people should pursue if at all possible, and usually there are good options out there, especially if you're willing to adopt non-babies. If you're willing to adopt kids who are 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever years old, I think it can be easier. I don't know everything about it, but it is something to look into and shouldn't be stigmatized at all. Story 9. I babysat for a few people. One family friend of my parents has 2 kids, me 13 or 14, with a fresh babysitter license. I got scared by their bay window and called them every hour they were late. I was staying the night, but they said they'd be home by 10 or 11. They were not back by 1. I started calling, I think 10:30 or something. Called 3 or 4 times before falling asleep. 2, babysitting for my friend who has 3 kids. I was babysitting 2 of them. My friend is maybe 25, I'm 20. She always left me weed for the night and had a full house of food. Story 10. Story 1 reminds me of that television series, I think it's called The Good Son. In the television series, the guy's father was a doctor who turned out to be a serial killer, and his study, if memory serves me from the show, led to a hidden room in the house. He, if I remember correctly, part of the story was the study got found by the babysitter, but I could be wrong, it wasn't exactly yesterday I watched the show. The guy hiding money in the books honestly sounds more like somebody screwing around to see if the babysitter's gonna find it and take it. Rich people do freaky effed up crap like that. Story 11. I used to babysit kids in the neighborhood. The worst part I've heard was a 5-year-old thanking me to potty train him. At home, the parents would just get him a diaper and leave it on for days on end. Ended up calling the police about the situation, as well as showering the kid to clean him. And at the parents' house, the police had found weed, random drugs, and lots of alcohol. Both parents were arrested, and the kid is my adopted brother now. He did ask me to keep his name out of the story to remain anonymous. That really sucks, what your now brother had to go through. No child should have to deal with that kind of stuff, and I'm glad that you said something, because we've had the story that said that sometimes calling CPS can be unfruitful, and sadly that is the case sometimes, but I still think it is the appropriate thing to do. It can sometimes lead to kids getting out of terrible situations and finding a new family like your brother found with you. And I think that's wonderful. And I hope that you're both really happy together and can have a great life. And for the folks where it doesn't always work out, I wish I had an answer to that. I don't, but I still think you should try and not give up hope, because situations can get better. Story 12. You are babysitting, catch one of the parents being busy with people other than their spouse. The immediate reaction should be, "Sorry, I didn't know you were busy. I'm short on cash and I wanted to ask for a raise. Do I talk with you or with your spouse?" 9 out of 10 times you will get that raise. Story 13. Those kids are probably being abused even more at an orphanage. My girlfriend's dad grew up in an orphanage, and I'd rather live with mildly abusive parents. There's definitely a point where I'd prefer the orphanage, though. Story 14. The lady with the intercourse toys sounds like a pretty good person, honestly. She was upfront and honest about what was going on and made sure the babysitter wasn't going to stumble on it and be super weirded out. Good way to handle it. I'm totally with you. There's way too much people stigmatizing adults having intercourse toys. And so, yeah, I think that the person who was upfront with the babysitter about that stuff was in the right. There's nothing wrong with them having those toys and just letting folks know stuff. So, yeah, I'm with you. Story 15. I babysat for a couple. The husband was a chemistry teacher and the wife an accountant. I found out later on accident that the wife was sleeping with her boss because her husband made crystal. Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.